Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CAS Virtual Showcase 2021. And this talk by Isabel Leggio and Vicky Dodds on the Barefoot EYFS resources. My name is Dr. Chips. Lovely to be hosting this session. And I'm the CAS Outreach Manager for the Northwest. And I'm also joined by Wendy Piccinini, who is going to be monitoring the question window throughout and will be joining us at the end to serve up any questions that you have to our two speakers this afternoon. In terms of housekeeping, during the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask any questions. The top of the window has an orange rectangle which can be expanded or collapsed. Wendy's going to be making notes of any questions posed there, and we'll answer these at the end. If there's time, I'm sure there will be. If you don't have your question answered at the end, please do post them in the CAS forum or across the CAS social media channels, and we will get back to you that way. The hashtag for the CAS Virtual Showcase is CASVirtual21. And just a reminder that all attendees are in listen-only mode. So let me please introduce Isabella and Vicky. Isabella is a primary computing specialist with over 20 years teaching experience, and Vicky has been a primary teacher for 18 years and a nearly combined 40 years of experience between here. Both Vicky and Isabella work with a range of primary schools in different parts of the country to develop computing provision and are the authors behind the Barefoot EYFS resources, which they're going to talk about this afternoon. So I know they're very excited to deliver this session, so I will stop talking. I will hand over and we'll see you at the end to talk through any questions that arise. So over to you.
Lovely, thank you. Hi everyone, hi, I'm Isabella. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the Barefoot resources that we've developed for the EYFS, and we're going to give you a little bit of background into how they were developed and the idea of computational thinking at EYFS. We're going to show you some of these activities, and of course at the end we'll show you where you can find them, and happy to take any questions. I would imagine that most of you have heard of the Barefoot program and Barefoot Computing, but just in case you haven't, Barefoot is a national project designed to help teachers with computer science, and contains a wealth of really wonderful cross-curricular activity and lesson ideas, as well as self-teach materials. And traditionally it's kind of focused on 5 to 11-year-olds, and now we have these lovely EYFS resources that people have been asking for a long time. So we're really pleased that we've got these to share with you, and we hope that you'll enjoy taking part in them with your children too. So let's just start, before we look at the activities, thinking about what computational thinking, which is a strange term if you haven't heard it before, what it looks like at EYFS. So when we talk about computational thinking, we're actually talking about a set of problem-solving skills that we can use in everyday life across all sorts of situations as adults and as children. We're talking about skills which do not need any technology, so none of the activities that we show you will require any sort of technology setup or any sort of devices or computers. These are skills that are learned away from a computer. And what's really, really key, and we're probably going to keep saying this, is that the children that we teach in EYFS are already using and learning about computational thinking. So what we show you is going to be nothing new, and hopefully as we go through the activity ideas and the concepts, you'll be thinking, oh, actually we do this already, but it looks a bit like this, or oh, we do this already when we're learning about number, for example. So just keep that in mind as we go through. And I thought we'd start, just before we actually go into the computational thinking concepts and skills, by just asking you to have a little think about those kinds of problem-solving skills that you might use in your classroom with your children or your setting. What kinds of skills or concepts or approaches do you think might be part of computational thinking in an EYFS setting? And you've got your question box that you can type into there. So we'll just give you a minute or so, and if you just have a little think and type in anything you can think of that might be linked to teaching computational thinking at early years, that would be great. So I'll give you a minute to do that.
So I'm just going to share some responses that are coming through. Following a sequence of instructions is one of the responses we've had so far.
Brilliant, that's a great one. Yeah, we'll talk about that more in a second, but that's a brilliant start.
And working out which part of a model to build first.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, so we'll definitely touch on that. Perhaps breaking things down into parts to make it easier to tackle a task is a great one.
Yep, patterns, brackets, numbers, shapes, etc.
Very good. Yeah,
trial and they're all coming. Hang on, can't keep up now. I should start deleting the ones that I've already read. Trial and error, adapting strategy when first idea does not work, etc. E.g., how to get a ball back from over the fence. Curiosity, questioning, lots of great stuff coming through.
Brilliant. Okay, thanks for those. Yeah, all really, really great answers. So thank you for contributing. If we have a look at the Computational Thinkers early years poster, so some of you who have used Barefoot computing resources in the past might be familiar with the primary version of this poster. And so some of the vocabulary may be familiar. We can see on this poster, we've got the concepts on the left and the approaches to teaching computational thinking on the right. So if we I'm just going to quickly go through them. Concepts, we've got logical reasoning, which is all about anticipating and explaining. I think someone mentioned explaining. We've got abstraction, working out what's important and ignoring the things that are not important. Pattern, we definitely had, so well done. Comparing, spotting similarities and differences, and maybe continuing patterns too. Algorithms, so all to do with instructions and sequencing and getting things in the right order. Decomposition, we definitely had, so breaking problems down into steps to make them easier to tackle, to manage. And then over on the right, the approaches, and lots of these again were mentioned, so tinkering, which just means playing and exploring, having a go, seeing what does what. Creating, making things, checking and fixing them. Collaboration, which is playing and working cooperatively, and very important one, persevering, so not giving up but keeping on trying even if things don't always work the first time. So all of the activities that we show you are closely linked to these concepts and approaches, and when we show you an activity plan you'll see where these are referred to. But if we think about why computational thinking is important at EYFS, there's lots of reasons why it's important, but a couple for you to be thinking about. The problem-solving nature of computational thinking is closely aligned with the characteristics of effective learning. We'll look at those in a second. And by aligning computational thinking, we ensure progression through use of the same vocabulary as our colleagues in Key Stage 1 and beyond, and linking to school readiness and making sure we're supporting children for that and giving them a broad range of knowledge and skills linked to the statutory framework. So although we know that technology itself is no longer included in the framework, in the new framework, these computational thinking skills are applicable across a whole range of subjects and activities, and you'll see them in pretty much every activity you're planning for within your early years classroom. And we mentioned the characteristics of effective learning and the links between those concepts and approaches. So in this table here, we can see the concepts and approaches down the left, and we can see the characteristics of effective learning along the top there. And you can see actually the really clear mapping there of the links between the activities that we've developed and where they fit with characteristics of effective learning. So particularly in that playing and exploring strand, and in the creating and thinking critically strand too. So at the heart of our resources for early years is a guide to computational thinking, which is designed obviously for practitioners and teachers to help them become familiar with how computational thinking might look at early years, and clear up some vocabulary that's used, because some of that may be new to some practitioners, and also make sure that we can understand how all of the computational thinking concepts are linked with the various different areas of learning. So when we show you the resources, that document will be there. So just to make sure that everyone kind of knows what it is we're aiming for with these resources, that's a good first step, starting point. And linked to that slightly newer resource, which has come out from after one of our teachers actually had an idea for developing this. So we've developed this into practitioner prompt cards, which was a great idea as a kind of quick guide to the different concepts and approaches. And so she just has them here on this lanyard, so the practitioners can use them and access them really quickly when they're in an activity, and you can just print them off from the link we'll give you. But you've got the concept on one side, so for example algorithms, and then you've got key prompts and questions to really pull out the computational thinking in that activity. So just by giving the practitioner a little bit of guidance and a little bit of support when they're thinking about these different aspects while they're taking part in an activity. So you've got the computational thinking guide, and then you've got the practitioner prompt cards there as adult resource. So I'm going to show you a couple of sets of our resources, and I'm just going to give you a little taster of how they look, and then Vicky's going to show you some too. So Boats, Ahoy and Busybodies are two sets of activities, and within each of those sets there are 4 activity plans. So within Boats Ahoy, as the name suggests, all about boats. What is a boat? Is it a good boat? Onboard role play and build a boat. So they're the 4 different activities there. And then within the Busybodies set, we've got parts of our body, make a body, look how we grow, and movement algorithms. And these themes were all chosen because they were themes that were widely used across a range of EYFS settings. Okay, so these are the ones that we started with. And with all of the activities, you'll see within them is a kind of mapping to the computational thinking aspects and skills that are covered within each one. So there's a really broad range of coverage across them all. So just to show you how it's kind of structured, within each activity is a table that looks a little like the one you can see on the slide. So this is a table about links and key questions to encourage computational thinking. And this is really, really key in all of the activities, because the activities you see will be fairly simple activities and things that hopefully you'll do already in your everyday practice. But this part of the activity really pulls out the computational thinking. So it will give us in the column on the left the concept or approach that we're looking at. In the column in the center, it will tell us about that aspect. So for example, if we look at the first one, tinkering occurs as children try out different objects and see what happens. They use logical reasoning to predict which object will float and could be a boat and which will not. As they test their ideas, they build up ideas about floating and sinking. Even if their predictions are not correct, they continue to try things out. So there's a bit of perseverance there too. So that tells us about what that approach is and how it fits with this activity. And then in the column on the right, you get some key questions linked to the activity that will really help you to draw out the computational thinking when you're working with the children. So that table you'll see on every one of the activities. And just to show you how a couple of these activities look, For example, in Busybody's movement algorithms, the children follow instructions, so an algorithm, to make a simple set of movements or a dance routine, and they can adapt and change that routine to make their own routine and test it to see if it works. So they're provided with these resource cards if you would like to use them, and they order those and make their own algorithms, and they can actually make them slightly more complex using the cards on the right there. So we've got quickly and slowly, and even bringing in some repeats. So the very beginnings of creating their own algorithms and adapting algorithms that they've already been given. And within Busybodies, we've got one of the activities called Look How We Grow. So this one focuses on pattern and algorithms. And in this activity, they notice the different stages of growth, and they put the stages in order, so into an algorithm, by sequencing the cards. But they're also looking at patterns by noticing what is the same and what is different, both in the young of different animals, but also what is the same and what is different in the young and fully grown categories. And these are the little resources that come with this activity too. So a couple of Busybodies ones there. Now Vicky has carried out some of the Boats Ahoy activities, so she's just going to talk you through what you can see on this slide here.
So hi everybody, I'm Vicky, as Isabella said. So really we wanted to show you kind of how it looked in the classroom as well, that, you know, all these resources are tried and tested, and we want to show kind of how all of these key terminology that we want you to try and push into the kind of early years setting looks. So it's allowing you to teach the fundamental concepts such as things like abstraction, logic and reasoning. So for example, on the bottom left hand side you can see a little boy there, or two little boys talking to me about abstraction, looking at all the materials that we could possibly use, deciding on which ones would help us explore creating a boat, looking at floating and sinking, and really exploring. The best part of this, I would say, is allowing the children to communicate with you what they think, and you stepping back and just having those really key effective questions that you want to put in place. And also as well, it really supports those children in terms of those non-verbal children, those children that might look at you, nod their head, shake their head, giving them multiple choice questions where they might give you an answer, but having the resources to pick up and demonstrate what they're actually thinking. In the middle picture, you can see the two little boys there. Once we started creating the models, we started talking about logic, and it really easily started us on this track of properties and materials. It was something that was the boys were really keen to talk to me about how the materials absorbed water. They said sucked it in, but it was the same concept, absorbing water, and how the water ran off certain materials. So that made it more practical for them to use as a sail. They were really keen to demo, and it was quite, you know, at the very bottom there on the left hand side, you'll see there's a little video of it. The children were really engaged, and it was quite hard to actually move other children away from the challenge. So it's engaging those children on a level where you are facilitating the learning, but the children are communicating with you what their thoughts are. And then on the bottom right hand side, as you can see, the boys were in their Batman outfits. It was part of a day that they had in the early years that they got to test out, so you could see the lesson from beginning to end, and it only took half an hour, and the amount that we got out of it in terms of the knowledge and understanding, they could immediately test, evaluate, then change, debug. And we talked and used all this language with the children, which was really, really important. But the whole point of this is that early years practitioner is really scaffolding, using those effective questioning and asking those open questions where the children can explore the answer rather than you giving them the answer. So lots came out of this session with them, as you can see. Isabel, I don't know if you want to move on to the next slide for me.
Yeah, sure.
So obviously, we've been developing the earlier resources for some time, but some of the summer resources that have come out at the moment, there's, for example, Seaside Tangrams, colour collection and journeys, and these don't have to be done in any particular order. They can be done to suit you and to suit what you're doing in the classroom, and it will lead on to other areas, which is fantastic. So as you can see, there's something called Seaside Tangrams, and all I've done is popped on a few of the key questions that kind of initiate the learning and the concepts and approaches that you're going to be looking at. Yes, a lot of them overlap, but we want that in early years and foundation stage. We want children to be developing these skills constantly, so that when they hit kind of key stage one, as Isabella said about that school readiness, when they hit kind of key stage one, they're ready. So as you can see, there's something called Seaside Tangrams, which I'll go on to explain a little bit more about in a moment. Something called journeys, which can relate to anything. So even if what we talk about doesn't quite, you know, float your boat, as in it doesn't suit quite what you're doing, you can link it to anything that you're doing. Journeys can be linked to any part of the curriculum, for example, Christmas, anytime. And then we've got something called colour collection, which I'll talk you through, and how you could actually progress that lesson on as well. Okay. If you could pop onto the next slide for me, that would be fab. So what I wanted to do again was show you what these resources actually look like. Seaside Tangrams is something I developed to talk to the children about this idea of shape. It was something that was taken out of the early years curriculum, and I think it's something that's really, really important. Understanding shape and understanding the properties, being able to rotate things and put them in place and decide on how you are going to solve a problem. So the idea of this activity is the children are given a variety of different shapes, and you develop this by looking at books or talking about journeys, talking about, you know, if they've been to the seaside, what have they noticed. And the two girls you can see in the very middle there were talking about their experiences. If children haven't experienced going to the seaside, which some children might not have, you can use books and resources. There's lots out there for you to use, okay? And the idea of this activity was the children started creating a picture and started tessellating, moving, rotating, organising shape. And the idea that was quite nice is the girls had very different approaches to what they were doing. So it meant that there was no one way of doing it. You could talk about it, and the children were sharing shapes and talking about why they were going to use certain shapes for certain reasons. This really leads really nicely into things like journeys and stories, maths. We're looking at maths, looking at number as well. Also as well, things like art focuses that you might want to look at. For example, when I've done this activity with children, we've looked at Juan Miro, Spanish artist, and Pablo Picasso, and it leads really nicely into other artwork that you might want to do. So it's a really good starting point. But the children, as I said, got a really good understanding of arranging, rotating, combining. And as well, I did the activity at the same time as them, and they were talking to me about what I did and how it was different to their own work. A lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, children sharing their language, which was really, really important. And then obviously the children had a fabulous piece of artwork at the end that they could take home and share with their parents and talk about what they'd learned at school that day. So if you want to pop onto the next slide, that would be fabulous. So from there, we did say all of these activities, you don't have to have technology, but if you are lucky enough in your setting to have robots or things like that, floor robots, you can move it into that kind of activity as well. So this was following on, these children had a go at the Seaside Tangrams with me, and from that they started using these floor robots to develop their own picture shapes. So they created a whole setting, a seaside setting with fish and all sorts of things by simply putting and controlling the robot and asking it to do certain things. You can use any robot for this. So any robot, for example, B-bots, if you've got those in your setting, or these robots, the Clement-Tony mines, even strapping a piece of, you know, a bit of masking tape and a pencil to the robot and having a go and just exploring. The children got a lot out of this. The little girl in the middle and on the right was very, very able. She obviously had experience of this, so already my kind of formative assessment of what this child was able to do, but then collaborating with this little boy on the left-hand side in terms of what he was going to do and how he was going to help her develop this picture. And I just stood back and watched and talked to them and asked them the key questions. So you can see the tinkering, creating, debugging and persevering worked all hand in hand, and it was, you know, throughout that session with them. If you want to pop onto the next one for me, that would be brilliant. Moving on, this was another one of the summer activities called colour collection. This one can take over a series of lessons. It doesn't have to just be a 20-minute activity. It depends on your setting and what you've got. So obviously on the left-hand side, you can see this is my son. I took him out on a walk to collect lots of different things he might see in his environment. You could do this in the playground. So we collected bits of flowers, leaves, all sorts of different things that he wanted to have a look at. And we came back and we talked about how we would sort them and, you know, what properties they had that were the same. Obviously, the questioning I had was very different for him to make sure that he understood what I was talking about. But we used this colour sorting sheet that you can see just in the centre there, and talked about how we would use colour to help us, because I wanted to relate it to something that he understood. From that, we use simple things like, you could use things like canes or chalk or masking tape, just to set out this idea of sorting colour out into a bar, into a number where I can start to count it. So already we've kind of looked at number, we've looked at sorting, collecting materials, looking at data, so the children have got an understanding from the beginning right to the very, very end of what they're doing. So you can see at the top right there, he was started sorting the collection out and started comparing, and brought out really key points. For example, he noticed just because something was big didn't mean there was more of it, because he had to count it by number, and he checked, he compared bars with one another to make sure that what he was doing was accurate. And there was lots of questioning that came from this. On the bottom right there, you can see that this is an option, this isn't something you have to do, but we do start to look at exploring things like pictograms when we are in early years and Key Stage 1. So it was that introduction that, you know, how can we sort this? How would technology help us do this? And we use something called J2E, which you can get through Teach Computing, and you can get as a free resource, and it allows you to just create pictograms. So we've created a little video of that you can access. It's very simple and straightforward, and we just use color blocks and represented the data, so you could see right from the very beginning to the end there was a good amount of teaching that took place, and it would definitely support your Key Stage 1 teachers in terms of what they were going to do next. I don't know if you can pop on to the next one for me. Again, this is another one of them. So as I said, you don't have to do these in any particular order. It depends on when it suits your curriculum. And this is a session called Journeys. This is a really key one, and especially if you've got children who won't pick up a pencil and are very disengaged with picking up pencils and actually writing. Really good at developing fine and gross motor skills, because the children are moving around on the floor and never tend to do activities like this at a desk. So this activity here looked at a journey that this child had actually gone on. It was something familiar to him, and it might be a journey that you go on with your children to the park, or it might be a journey they, as they come to school, what do they see? And the children developed their own map. So all I did was to initiate it, was to create a big road in the middle so there was a clear beginning and a clear end. And if we start thinking about algorithms and sequencing, the children had to, in a group task, had to start thinking about what came first, what came next, what came before, or what came after. So all this language that we wanted the children to fully understand, so that when they hit Key Stage 1, they understand and hope they've got real life experience of it. They started developing. I said, well, what did you see first on your journey? What came after that? What was at the end of the journey? And then they started filling in the blanks in between. Very simple, drawing, sketching ideas. And then from that, what you can then do is start building it further by adding in things like role play. So the little boy on the right decided to go off and get his cars, and he was actually going to go on the journey, and he started talking about his journey and what he could see, describing things to me. So it really brought out lots of communication, lots of language from him, and it gives children a chance to explore that, and you to prompt them as well. So lots of tinkering, lots of collaboration, but the key thing here is looking at things like that logic and sequencing algorithms and what that actually means. And this is terminology you can use with the kids and they will understand. It can link to things like, if you've got iPads in your environment, it can link to things like Puppet Pals 2, where the children can go on and start developing little animations where they've got a character moving along a scene and they put things in place. What did you see at the beginning? Who was the next character that you spotted? And this can link to all different areas of the curriculum, like cowboys, space, all sorts of different things. So it's an app that I would definitely recommend you kind of have a look at. I don't know if you can pop onto the next slide. I think then that's moving on to you again, Isabella.
Perfect. Thanks, Vicky. Great. Really lovely ideas there. So last bit that we're going to talk to you about is the Be Cyber Smart resources, and the ones that are applicable to EYFS. So there's two activities here. I'm going to show you who owns this and Keep It Safe is what they're called. These were both designed as home learning activities, but can equally be used with adults supporting, or again sent home for a really nice activity for parents to do with their children, and perhaps feedback on, so get them thinking about online safety in the early years. So who owns this is a scavenger hunt activity, which looks at ownership and permission, and the idea that if we want to use something which doesn't belong to us, we need to ask for permission. So in this activity, the children can go on this hunt around their environment or their class or home, and find these devices or objects and write them down, draw them out maybe, think about who owns it and whether they have permission to use it, and whether that permission has any conditions attached to it. So what can I do with it? So I might be able to use my mum's tablet at the weekend, and I might only be allowed it to play learning games, for example. So really nice work to come before what they'll be leading on to for our Key Stage 1 cyber smart activities. And the second one is keep it safe. So you can see here part of the keep it safe resource is this kind of Where's Wally style picture. So I think we're probably a little bit short on time here, so I'll just explain it. But essentially, the children here have to look in this image, this is part of the image, for digital and non-digital devices and objects which have locks or passwords. So, for example, I can see here an Amazon type locker, I can see a briefcase, I can see an ATM, I can see handcuffs, I can see a card reader, etc. And within the activity, the children have to spot the locks by circling them in the image. They have a little tick list to help them if they need it, and they then look around their home or area and look for other devices which need locks or passwords and add those to their work. So we're really thinking here about kind of creating this discussion between adult and child about our own privacy and our own security, and why some things do need to be kept private. So quite a tricky concept, but hopefully in a really accessible way for the youngest children. And the very last one is Cyber Snakes, which is a really lovely take on snakes and ladders, all linked to online safety, where they have this board of do's and don'ts. It can be printed out and sent home again for parents to do, or it's really nice used in the classroom on your board or your display with digital counters. And they have do's, which will take them up ladders, and don'ts, which will slide them down the snakes. But again, the real kind of learning comes from the discussion around these scenarios, and thinking about, you know, why some are do's and why some don'ts. So hopefully a couple of really nice online safety activities that if you haven't really started looking at online safety yet with EYFS, then perhaps that will be a good place to start.
We just wanted to quickly share with you the quick overview of kind of what we've gone through today, including the kind of CT guide and posters and cards that are available, all the activities. So each of these, if you click on the link, it will take you to that activity, so you don't have to go and hunt for it. But Boats Ahoy, Busybodies, Seaside Tangrams, colour collection, all the Seaside colour collection and journeys is part of the summer activities. Okay, and then at the very bottom, we've got obviously the cyber resources, who owns this, Keep It Safe, and Cyber Snakes. So we've tried to make it as accessible as we can. We've also got that link that you can just see in the middle there, because obviously you have to jump from into lessons and different activities and home learning. What we wanted to try and do is make it as accessible for you, so that all the things we've spoken about today, you could just jump in and go and have a look for them. So if you do click on that link, the Barefoot Early Years, it takes you onto a page where it's got all of the information. It's got the computational thinking guide, and at the very, very bottom of that page, as you can see, there's all the things that Isabella has spoken about, all the skills that we wanted to look through. Any key questions, resources that you might have in your classroom that you might want to bring out and kind of put out for the children, kind of all the things that we've spoken about so far, but probably the most important is at the bottom there, a quick link to all the different materials that you might want to go away and have a look at. And remember, just because it's a summer activity, it doesn't mean that you might not be able to link it to something else. For example, all of the e-safety can be done at any time of the year, so it's just well worth going and having a look, because, you know, obviously with summer holidays coming up, you've got plenty of opportunities to kind of plan what you're going to do for next year and how you're going to incorporate maybe these resources. So I think now we're going to go across to if you've got any questions that we can answer or help you with.
Yeah, thank you so much, both of you. That was absolutely fantastic. I've been scribbling down stuff, and thank you for producing such wonderful resources for Barefoot for EYFS. I particularly like the lanyard add-ons, as do a few other people. I think there was lots of a flurry of, oh, that's a good idea coming through in the chat. EYFS teachers do like attaching things to their lanyards as well. So slowly weighed down with them, but that's a great one. So Wendy, I do think there was some other questions that have come through. Is that right? I'll let you pose them.
Thanks, John. Yes. Just following on from the lanyard, the discussion about that, Rachel was asking where she can find them on the Barefoot site, but I think you've just answered that. So is the best way to go through that link that you mentioned? Is that the best way to find those resources?
Yeah.
And
so,
sorry to interrupt, just to let you know, I popped that link into the chat for everyone as well.
brilliant. Yeah, that's the best place to go for everything. So we've tried to put everything together there. So yeah, glad you like them.
Brilliant. Nick was asking, where does the effective learning table come from?
Oh, okay. Right, let me just make sure we're talking about the same thing here. 1 second. Is it that one?
I think so, yeah, because it was earlier on in the presentation that Nick sent that question in. I think that's where you were, yeah.
So, yeah, good question. That is from the Teacher's Computational Thinking Guide. So that document, which is a good one to start with. It's again on that link that you just mentioned, the link where all of the resources are, and it's the Teacher's Computational Thinking Guide. So let me get the exact name so that we can actually, I've got it here, haven't I? Yeah. So it's, can you see my screen where it says Early Years Guide? Yeah. So it's just where I'm hovering now, Early Years Guide. That's where that screenshot comes from.
Super, thanks.
Brilliant. Matthew has put, firstly, thank you so much. These resources all look fab. Well done. My question is about the new EYFS framework, which has obviously removed all references to technology. What advice are you giving schools about how computational thinking fits in to the new framework?
I was going to say, I think it was what Isabella said earlier on, you're doing it anyway, and probably you're doing it really, really well, but you just don't call it computational thinking because it links into communication, it links into literacy, it links into mathematics, it links into the world around us and what we're doing, and technology is a massive part of that. So preparing the children for Key Stage 1 and primary phase, where they're using these things already probably in their homes and in the setting, is a key part of it. So, you know, we're just equipping children with the skills that they need for future learning.
Brilliant. And finally, if there's some of the attendees listening today who would really like to get started, but if they don't feel that perhaps they haven't got a huge amount of resources that are related to technology, can they get started tomorrow? Well, how would you advise them to go forward with this?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the great thing about these activities is that you don't need any technology. You literally need nothing. So probably as it's summer, and well, it's meant to be summer, and it won't be summer for very much longer, I'd have a look at some of the lovely new summer activities that Vicky's produced. So have a look at the guide, maybe print off the lanyard prompts, and just, you know, pick a summer activity and have a go with that. As it's not nearly autumn, but autumn resources will be out soon, swiftly followed by winter and spring. So summer's the first in a set of kind of season-based resources. So yeah, I think that's a great place to start.
I think it's a term that you'll probably hear is unplugged, and it is unplugged. It's looking at, you know, the computational skills fill anything that you're doing, any activity that you're doing in school. So you don't have to have, you know, you don't have to have the tech there.
Brilliant, thanks. It sounds like there's a lot to look forward to that's coming out from Barefoot.
Yes.
So that's exciting.
Very exciting to know that there is more on the way.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, thank you so much again, Vicky and Isabella, for a fantastic session. Thank you also, Wendy, for sharing the questions that have come through there. Just to let everyone know as well that's tuning in, at the end of this webinar, there will be a short survey which will appear on the screen, and we would be grateful if you would take a minute to complete that. And a recording of this webinar will be available on the CAS YouTube channel after this session. And we do hope to see you other sessions in the CAS Virtual Showcase Summer 2021. We've got other sessions coming up straight after this, actually, in about 20 minutes. We've got a Instagram live session, top tips for trainee teachers. So you can join us on the Instagram account at Computing at School. And I believe, Wendy, you're doing, if you haven't already filled up your fix of EYFS stuff, you're doing an Instagram live session tomorrow. What was the name of that session, Wendy, that we've got coming up tomorrow?
It's top tech tips for EYFS, and it starts at 5 on Instagram tomorrow.
Fantastic. And on that tongue twister, I think we will say cheerio. Thanks for joining us. Please do continue to spread the word about computing at school, and have a lovely rest of your day. Thanks again all. Bye for now.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.